Yeah, I'm getting there. I have a producer over here. Y'all may know my wife. She's helping Barry get a list filled out. We do lunches down at SAC for the Christian Student Center on a monthly basis. And this coming on the 26th, we need people to sign up for main dishes and to provide desserts. And we need enough to feed 36. So they've divided it up into threes, 3 main dishes, 3 desserts, so 12 apiece. If you can help with that, if you'll give Barry Lindsay a call after you've committed, she'll give you all of the scoop on what you need to do. And then, well, if you all will do me a favor, see that this form gets back to my producer so that I will not have to pay for it later. I'll start it right here. If there are those in the class that haven't been here or have lost their material or needs one for today, I've got extras over here. So raise your hand so I can make sure you get one. Okay, Daniel, here's the book. We need a red folder too. If you don't have your red folder, we need the red folders. Need one of those. Thank you. Give me another. There they go. You got a book? No. Okay, great. Anybody else in need of the paperwork? All right. In case you don't know what you're getting into, and you've forgotten what we were talking about, we'll see if we can't get caught up. One thing I need to remember as a New Year's resolution is get a new battery. So you'll see me running over here. I've got to punch this thing to make it go from page to page. Well, let's refresh our memory where we've been. First lesson was talking about who owns everything. It's not us, it's God. God owns everything. He gives us everything. And it's really not ours. It's only for us to administer it. So we take care of the resources that God gives to us. And we need to look at it that way, because what he's trying to have happen is he's trying to make sure that money or possessions do not become an idol to us. We don't start living our lives centering ourselves on acquiring assets for ourselves or trying to build wealth, though acquiring wealth is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when it's in the wrong context that it becomes an issue. And then that was the first 2 lessons. And then the third lesson was actually taught for me by Jack. And Jack went over the parable of the talents. And in the parable of the talents, there are really 2 things I hope you got out of that. Number 1, if we don't administer the resources that were given properly, there is a cost to that. There is accountability to that. And we don't want to have to face that accountability, because sometimes that accountability is not pleasant. But another thing is, you shouldn't be afraid. Whenever you're taking care of assets and resources that God has given to you, He's also given you a mind. He's given you skills. He's given you access to other people who have talents and resources that can be available to you, so that you don't underutilize the resources. Remember the guy with 5 talents? How many did he get back? He got 5 more. He didn't do that by just sitting on his hands. He put the resources to work. And when I think about putting resources to work, I think about risk, because that's what got the guy with 1 talent in trouble. He was afraid. He was afraid to take a risk. I mean, his master told him, you could have at least gone to the money changers and done something with it. But no, he dug a hole and he buried it. Don't be afraid to take the risk. And if you think you need help in whether or not the risk is appropriate for you, there are people in this world you can ask. People who are trained in that way. Now, I'll be quick to tell you, my risk level is probably a whole lot lower than these younger folks over here. Okay. I wasn't talking about you, Paul. Those that are sitting across here. No, it's just natural. As you get older, you become more risk averse because you have less time to correct your mistake. Okay? You know, when I was working, I could contribute more aggressively to overcome the amount of mistakes that I made in my risk analysis. But now that I'm not working, I don't have that resource coming to me necessarily that allows me to replenish what losses I take from time to time. And that's okay. I just have to power back my wants and my needs a little bit maybe. Or maybe I just need to take a different perspective of how I administer the assets. We'll talk about that more later. That gets us caught up to where we were after the first 3 lessons. In the last 2 weeks, you've had a reprieve. And before you went on your reprieve, you were given an assignment. Now I'm going to look around, look in your eyes, and I'll be able to tell whether or not you filled out that form. And those that are giggling in the back probably are tippling you already. They've done. That's okay. You've got to figure out, though, if you want to get your finances under your control, you've got to really know where you're starting. And if you don't know what you're spending money on, you can't possibly shift it from one pile to another pile. You've got to know first off, are you spending your money wisely? Now, spending money is easy for me to do. I get my card out and I go to the store. I don't even have to swipe it or stick it in this hole anymore. There's a little place that I can just lay the card on and zap, it's gone and it's spent. It's easy to spend money. But how much do we engage the gray matter in the process of spending? Anybody been to the grocery store lately? Okay. Have you ever noticed that up there where you're getting ready to check out, there's candy on this side and magazines on this side, chewing gum, what do they call that stuff you chew on that tastes like leather? Jerky, okay, yeah. You've got that stuff's up there in little bitty individual portion packs. You know why they put that stuff up there right beside the cash register? Impulse buying, yeah. They're trying to say, oh, okay, you're going to, if you will go through there, you're going to have to stand in line. After all, we must go through the cattle call in order to pay, to be separated from our money. And if you don't like to stand in lines, you can go over to the one where you do it yourself, and then they ask you how well you enjoyed the experience. Now, you go to Walmart and they come up with stars. Just as you are getting ready to, you pay, how did we do? Well, there was no one here. I don't know how you did. But you know what I'm saying, they've taken the junk away, so the impulse buying goes down. You got to wonder how much it's impacted the profitability of stores when they went from the impulse cashier-driven environment for checking out versus the self-serve environment. You know, when you had to go into the convenience store to pay for your gas, more likely you bought a Coke or you got some snacks, or whatever else was on your mind at the time you walked in, and then while you were waiting, you saw it, and your eyes became the window to your heart, where you thought you needed something that you might not have really needed. So, the question that I said it was on here is, should I really even ask the question? Yeah, did they do their homework? And if so, were there any surprises? How many of you made an attempt to look at your expenses? Just wait, okay, all right. If you made an attempt to look at your expenses, and you wrote it down for a week, maybe, or a few days, did you see anything that was a surprise to you? And would you be willing to share that? I remember back when I started this process for me, I did not realize how many candy bars and Coca-Colas I consumed and what the overall cost of those things were over a period of a week. $10, $20 maybe? It was, sometimes it really adds up. And if you go by a vending machine at work and it's calling to you, come and spend your money. You don't even have to have change anymore to use a vending machine. You can use a card. Just wave it at it and it'll suck the money out of your account. If you found a surprise, let me tell you, if you look closer, you can really be surprised. When I was working, I typically did not take my lunch. I would go, and my excuse was I needed to get away from the office, to get away from the pressures of the job. So I would go and drive to the nearest fast food restaurant. And as I pulled into the drive-thru, they had all these things, the specials. 2 Whoppers for $6, Not, I could get by with 1, 2 for only $6. I'm saving money. No, I ate them both at the same time. But I could have gotten by with a whole lot less. And if I had taken my lunch and used the leftovers that we ultimately threw out, I could have saved a lot of money. And that money could be used in other more productive ways. Ways that might be contribution to church. It might be a way to spend more time with my wife, having recreational time, which I never budgeted for. That's the thing. You need to, when you write down this stuff, don't think of it as saying, oh, he's going to beat me up with this. That's not the point. The point is to get you to recognize on your own, are there places you could better employ your assets? In just a little while, let me see how far down I've got to go. Oh, we got to create a plan. Now, if you're going to create a plan, you need to know where to start, right? Everybody needs somewhere to know how to start a plan. Well, when I went to the doctor about a year ago, he says, I've seen people like you before. You're shaped like an apple. You're shaped like an apple, a rather large apple, in fact, he said. And then he proceeded to kindly, gently tell me that I was overweight. Something that I was totally aware of. And he was getting ready to charge me $300 for him to tell me this. But he did something else. He said, I want you to have some blood work drawn. And that was my homework. I had to go spend a few minutes at Quest and let them draw the blood. And then about a week later, I get a phone call from him. He was a new doctor to me. I'd never had a phone call from a doctor before, except when I had failed to make the payment on the bill. But he let me know that there were some issues with some of my blood. My sugar level was elevated, like out of the top. And I have to confess, I do have a sweet tooth. And it was just a few weeks after the holidays. And my wife's a pretty good cook. No, she's a great cook. When she and I got married, I weighed 128 pounds. And at the time that the doctor took my weight that day, I was pushing 280. Now, she's sort of like Eve. It looked good to eat. But I was the one that sinned, okay? I was the one that yielded to the temptation. We've been working on that over the last year. But it's not something you can start and stop and be successful at. Same with the money. You can't start and stop. You've got to decide. This is the month where we all take our resolutions of what we think is important, what we need to do to change ourselves, okay? If you're going to be serious about handling the resources that God gives you, if you're really going to be serious about that, it's a process, a never-ending process. Never-ending process. One you've got to take seriously. So we got to start with the plan. So let's start with what God says. Good planning and hard work leads to prosperity. So to develop the plan, you need to know where you are. You need to know where you want to go. And you've got to be bought in to the priorities. Now, remember the first lesson? We talked about priorities. What should be our priority? It's not our money. It's not, we want to use the money the way God wants us to use the money. I mean, there's just nothing more that I can say. If we don't buy into that priority, might as well not be in the class. I mean, you really get it fixed. You got to really buy into that priority. Once you have these three elements, then you got to work on adjusting the plan. Now, in the book, on page 20 in the book, you have this chart. It's not in color in their book. It's black and white. And it is an allocation of how someone wanted to allocate the use of their funds. Take the gross income, then they took out the taxes. Wasn't it nice the way they put it down at the bottom like we had an option? But we had all the rest of this up here is comprised, 81% of it was comprised of decisions that we made on how we're using things. Now, I'm a former banker. I like to say that I'm a banker that sort of saw the light 30 years ago. I worked for the profit side, then I moved to the nonprofit side 30 years ago. And we had what we called little benchmarks on what people ought to be spending on various and sundry things. Well, one of the things that used to be the benchmark back in the glory days was that we felt like your shelter expenses, housing, that includes your taxes, your homeowner's insurance, the payment on the house, everything that you lay out, including maintenance too, okay? That shouldn't exceed 25% of your gross income. Now, they've got 28%. That was put up there by HUD. That's what the Housing and Urban Development folks put into the FHA program as the amount that they would deem appropriate for shelter expenses. Okay? This person was wanting to have gifts and alms of 11%, short-term savings of 3%, long-term savings of 3%, debt reduction of 4%, insurance of 2%. That ain't going to happen today. Transportation expenses, and that includes the car payment, the insurance, the gas, everything. Food and recreation. Now, what I think you'll find, in some cases, more cases than ought to be, is you're going to find that when people start out with 100%, they get down to the bottom, they've actually spent more than their gross. That's a problem. And where do they get their extra money? They go to their pocketbook and pull out a piece of plastic. That's what they normally do. And once that piece of plastic gets too heavy to carry, they'll go someplace and refinance the house, change that number up there, try to squeeze the payment down smaller. They'll leverage the equity that they've got in their home, and they'll pay the credit card off. And in less than 2 years, they'll have their card maxed out again in all probability. That's just the way it happens in our society. It's not that way everywhere, but this is America, the home of capitalism on steroids. And we've got to constrain ourselves. We should try to keep this at 100% on the expenditures versus the income. 100%. Why 100%? I'm including your savings in there, folks. I'm including your offerings in there. You shouldn't have to be borrowing. Not if you've already got some debt embedded in this thing. Your home, car. We also had another ratio. The total of your debt, the payments, just the debt payments, should not exceed 37% of your gross income. There are more people today that can't meet that ratio than can. Back during the days before 2008, there was a thing going on in the mortgage industry that was called liar loans. And people would stretch their imagination. They say, oh, I make X, and it might have been really X minus 15% that they were really making. And then they would come up and they would make that X fit those ratios. And there was no verification going on because all of the bankers who were in the mortgage business were trying to book as many as they could, sell them off in the secondary market, make it somebody else's problem when the chickens come home to roost. And those chickens came home to roost when the mortgage crisis began, 2008, 2009. And in some cases, still is in that way today because interest rates back then were really low. Throw on the fact that interest rates on a 30-year mortgage have more than doubled in the last 18 months. And you can see how that can be a terrible, terrible thing. People can't afford to get into a home. And prices of houses with inflation, prices have gone up too. Makes it even more difficult to get into a home. So we've got a problem in our country, and the only way we can solve it is ourselves individually. We've got to control ourselves. What I want you to do, we'll talk about this in more detail the last 5 minutes. I need somebody to be a timer. It's 25 minutes after the hour. Would somebody raise their hand and wave at me? Thank you. Adrian, I'll know it's you. Okay, he's going to wave his hand at me. And I've got 5 minutes to give you your assignment for next week. Really, it's 2 weeks. Because next week we won't have the class. But you will have 2 weeks. This is the most important time, though. This is the most important homework you'll do. We're going to get you to where you've done one of these for you. Not for you to show to me, for you to own yourself. Because remember, you are the only one that can make this happen for you. So we're creating a plan. And if you don't like what you see, there's only 3 things you can really do. You can increase your income, get a second job, get a better paying job. You can reallocate your variable expenses. That's code for cutting back. I didn't want to say that there. It might be harsh. It might cause some of you to have a heart attack. Think of it as reallocating, okay? Taking from one pot and putting it into another. Or you can sell assets and retire debt. Those are really the only 3 things you can do. No magic formula here, folks. Increase the income, decrease the outgo, or get rid of something you don't really have to have. And retire debt with that money.
How about winning the lottery?
That's a fool's errand, Paul. By the way, I didn't win. My wife turned my arm and told me to go get Quick Picks. But hey, that was in the budget, so that was okay. So you got to face your decisions, and they're tough. But you're not alone. You're not alone. Whenever you have to make tough decisions, what's the first thing you should do? Pray. Pray. Remember, we said we had helpers. We have the ultimate helper in God. He will help you face the reality of the problem that you have. Pray over every decision. You've got to do that. If you don't, you'll be like going to the doctor and not listening to him. One of the things we need to do is we need to start controlling our wants. All right. My wife says I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to proceed on. I need some people to volunteer. Tell me what you need. A need you have.
Place to live.
I'm sorry?
Place to live.
Okay, you need housing. Okay.
Transportation.
Transportation. Okay. I'm sorry? Did I hear this word right? Phone? Okay. What? Huh? Food and water. Okay. Sorry?
Electricity.
We'll expand that to utilities. I'm sorry? That's utilities. What else? Needs. Insurance? Ah. What else do you need? Huh? Community? Okay. What else do we need? Got it. I got it.
Healthcare.
Huh?
Healthcare.
Okay.
Which one are retirement needs? You can no longer take care of yourself. Retirement.
Okay. What else? Needs.
Does medicine go with healthcare?
Yes. Needs. Huh? Oh, am I not where I'm supposed to be? Okay.
You're saying money?
Money. Okay. Now, y'all are aware that we sent a mission team to Guatemala, right? And that mission team dug a water well? No, that was Honduras? Honduras, okay. What did we do in Guatemala? Oh, that was the one where they had the food. Everybody getting it off the truck. Yeah. Okay. Now, you are now in Guatemala. You now are middle class as defined by that society. Does that change your view of these? It may not change your view of individual items, but let me tell you, it probably does change your view of what is acceptable. A house in San Antonio, Texas, they say the last part of last year sold on average over $300,000, the average sales price of a home. What do you think a guy in Guatemala would say about that?
What a waste of my money.
Yeah, really. Transportation. Anybody got a car as old as mine? I've got one that's 7 years old and I'm really proud of it. It's in great shape. It's in better shape than I am. Huh? 10 years. Okay, good.
11, 12.
I kept a, what was it, Marilyn? It was the van. We had that van. We got that van in 1974. It was a conversion van. That thing got the worst gas mileage, 10 miles a gallon. It's just awful. Huh? I didn't live in it though. I didn't live in it. If I could have, I probably would have been better off. But it was, I didn't need that thing. I sure could have gotten by with a whole lot less. I've got vehicles that are paid for, but if I was living there, I might be satisfied with a horse pulling a cart. Or talking about transportation, I might be just as happy with a good pair of shoes. Do they have cell phone service in Guatemala? Do they? Do they? They have Wi-Fi. Wow, okay. I bet their meal budget's a fraction of what we have. They may not have utilities. Running water may be the river that goes down the stream there, close to where they live. Lights provided by the sun, the moon. I bet you there's a lot of folks that don't even know what air conditioning feels like. Clothes is a bit different too. They're happy to have things that are just cover themselves rather than going to some place and buying the latest name brand clothing.
You know, one of the men that led a prayer, I made a little talk about, I think it was Guatemala. What's the head of it? Anyway, he went down there, this was at Northside a few weeks, he went down there maybe to look things over. He stayed in one of the Guatemalan, Christian families' home. It had a little bitty house with a tin, that corrugated tin roof. They put him in one of their sons' bedroom, which is a tiny little room, you know, and so forth and so on. I still remember him mentioning those things.
Right. And they were happy to have what they had. Really happy to have what they had. We're unfortunately driven by what other people have. I mean, we think we have to have it just to make ourselves presentable. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like what Jesus was sort of telling them they didn't need to do. We worry about things we don't really need to be worrying about sometimes. Also, needs is interesting. What we need and what we think we need, not always the same thing. Sometimes we feel like we have to have things that many others would call luxuries, and they are really just fulfilling a need for us to have pleasure. Proverbs 21:17, whoever loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and olive oil will never be rich. Those were luxuries. We need to find a way to get rid of our luxuries or step back from our luxuries, okay? You got to be willing to do some things that you might not feel today in this room comfortable with thinking about. But sometimes you really do need to think about those things. Limiting luxuries is a real good way to get your expenses under control. It makes funds available. Yes, sir.
I used to have a friend here in San Antonio, and he said, all of the luxury, tomorrow you'll be a necessity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, what we have today, the house that I grew up in was a nice home. It's 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, 5 people. We wouldn't think of having just 1 bathroom. Really. You know, I never remember there being an argument in my house growing up about who was going to be in the bathroom or spending too much time in the bathroom. We knew who ruled the roost. Daddy got first priority. Mama got second priority. And then the kids really didn't want to go in there anyway. You know? And the house was about 1,200 square feet for 5 people. And we thought we were rich. Ever heard of people who have so much house they can't keep it clean? Yeah? Paul wrote a thank you note to the Philippians, closing his letter out to them. He appreciates them for so many things. He appreciates them for them providing for his needs. Actually, God was providing for their needs, for his needs, through them. We provide through our contributions at church for the needs of others in many other ways. Paul found himself to be, as he said, contented. There used to be a commercial about, I think it was Carnation milk. All of the cows that gave milk to the Carnation Company were called contented cows. You have to be pretty old to remember that commercial, okay? But they were contented, happy, satisfied. Contentment is the exact opposite of discontentment. And we are a discontented country, made up of discontented individuals. We need to know where we are. We need to know where we got to go. The Christian might pray, I thank you for everything I am blessed to have right now, and I rest in your promise to give me the desires of my heart and meet every need I have according to your riches and glory. You see, the financial goals I have submitted to you, I receive your grace, and I do so as I'm supposed to do, and I leave the rest to you. How many of you think you can really pray that prayer? How many of you will turn over what you're willing to consider a need to the Lord? That's a big change in mindset, folks. There was a time that when you wanted to buy a car, you saved for it. Delayed gratification. Today, we don't have anything like delayed gratification in our society.
Rates are going up, though.
Rates are going up, yeah. And what goes up will come down. I can attest to that. I was a banker during the late 1970s and early 1980s. The price of borrowing went so high that the government had to raise the legal amount you could charge for a loan. They raised it above 18% to 5% over the rediscount rate, which at the time was 21%. And back then, mortgages were 16%. And it was only 40 years they were down to 3%. What goes up can go down. Okay, I see you. I'm missing the good stuff. All right. Well, we need to take the replace our focus so that we don't look for stuff. The things that are really important in life are not stuff. When you die, somebody's going to get rid of your stuff. You can't take it with you. So why have it in the first place? Think about how many people will come to your funeral. Relationships are more important. I'm missing all this good stuff. Make a commitment to buy only what you can afford, rather than asking yourself why I must buy this to keep up. Ask if you really are going to enjoy it. I got a set of golf clubs and I don't even like to play golf. I really was trying to talk my wife into letting me buy a boat. I thought in retirement I'd like to go fishing on a boat. Then I got to thinking about how much it was going to cost to maintain the boat, the insurance on the boat, dragging it out of the garage and hauling it to the lake. By the time I get there, I'm too tired to fish, so I drag it back home. Yeah. Huh?
It's a hole in the water that you throw.
Yeah. A guy told me once the second happiest day in his life was the day he bought his boat. The happiest day was the day he sold it. Okay, now let's talk about where we've got to go. Your assignment between now and 2 weeks from today is to take your estimated expenses, write them down on that chart like is on page 20 in your book. Write it down. To be honest with yourself. Are you spending more than you have coming home. Think about the extra stuff too. We spent the last 90 days on our annual spending spree for the holidays. There were more people who caused themselves to get closer to bankruptcy in the last 90 days than you can imagine. Did you know that the month where most bankruptcies are filed is January? Second is February. It's not a good thing. I want you to be honest with yourself. Fill out your total money. Take your taxes. You've got to be assimilating the information for taxes this time of year anyway. Write down your gross income and then try to figure out exactly what you spent it on. Then take it and make it less shocking and put it in terms of percentages. Percentages of the gross income. Okay? That's your bottom number. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. Since we have to pay taxes.
Yes.
And donate to Social Security.
Yes.
Why don't we do it off of net?
Why don't we do it off of net? Okay. Because sometimes your net really isn't net of only those two things. People contribute to 401ks, and that money is taken off and it's stocked over here into your savings, and then you've got this other money that comes in from a match or whatever, and it's really not yours until you actually collect it. All right? So if you do it on a gross basis, you'll feel it a little bit more. And when you and those ratios I was talking about, the expense ratios and the housing ratios, they don't look at it on anything but a gross basis. They really don't. And the reason for that is because sometimes people say, well, I've got all this money over in this 401k. Yeah, but you're 49 years old and you can't get to it. All right? It's not there for you. Your spending and saving should be confined to what you have coming in. And if it's not, you need to do some adjusting one way or the other. All right? Spend time doing that. I can't be more serious to say, this is the most important thing you will do but for you to succeed in going forward in this class. Okay? You've got to understand that. You might find that you dipped into savings. That's what, remember just a few months ago when they were giving all this money away? During the pandemic, had this stimulus check coming and that stimulus check coming. And all of a sudden, the savings rate in the country went up to 12%. Highest it had ever been, the savings rate. And now, guess what? It's at 3%, one of the lowest numbers it's ever had. It used to average about 5%. A lot of people went out and spent the money that they got from a stimulus check, and they bought things with it that had a tail attached to it. I used $3,000 of stimulus money to buy a car. Oh my, it's got a 6-year payment stream following it. This is the most important homework you'll ever have. Please, 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 I'm begging you, do this one thing. Not for me, for you. Okay? Is my 5 minutes up? Yep. Thank you. Have a good rest of this week. Happy New Year. Okay.